Hello, Year 8s. You are going to conduct a statistical investigation, and this investigation is going to be all about film. And what you need to think about is what questions can you ask about film? In other words, what is your line of inquiry going to be? What is it that you really want to find out? Here are some possible lines of inquiries. Have a look at these. Pause the video, have a look at these. Think about which one would interest you. Once you have thought about your line of inquiry, you need to state a hypothesis. Now, a hypothesis is a statement, and it's a statement that you then would collect data about, look at that data, present that data, analyse that data to see whether or not your hypothesis, your statement is true. Here are some possible hypotheses. Boys prefer watching comedies, so that's a statement, a hypothesis, that you could collect data on to see whether or not this is true. Action films are longer than comedy films, so again, a hypothesis, a statement, that you could collect data to see whether it's true or not. Pause the video and read through the other hypotheses, thinking all the time about would any of these interest you? Would you like to find out about these ones, or would you like to do your own hypothesis? Okay, so if you have chosen your line of inquiry and you have written your hypothesis, make sure you've written it on the sheet that's sent to you as well. You will then need to think about how you are going to collect your data. Are you going to get primary data, which means you would go and ask people? This obviously might be quite difficult at the moment because you might not have many people in your household to ask. So maybe you need to think about doing some kind of investigation where you use secondary data. And a bit later on in this PowerPoint, I will give you some good sources for the secondary data about film. You will have to think about how big a sample you need. It's not going to be any good looking at just 3 or 4 examples. You're going to need a lot more examples than that to be able to get a realistic picture. And how are you going to record the data you collect? Are you just going to write it all down? You've got to put it in some kind of table. And of course, will you use all the data available? And if so, why? And if not, how are you going to sample? How are you going to choose what data to use? It may be in your secondary data, there's an awful lot of data, and you don't need all of it. So you need to think about a fair way, a random way of collecting that data. Okay, you would then need to go on and do some diagrams and calculations, and you need to think about the best ones to do. You don't want to do diagrams that are unnecessary or calculations that are unnecessary. So the diagrams could be just different graphs, different charts, and your calculations could be around the mean, median, mode, range. Okay, so here's some examples of diagrams you might use. And again, just be careful, you don't need to do calculations that do not test your hypothesis. There's no point finding the mean if it's not relevant to the hypothesis you have. Once you have collected your data and presented your data, you will need to interpret and evaluate it. So you need to analyse your diagrams and calculations. So in other words, you need to say, what do they tell you? So you've drawn a diagram or you've made a calculation. What does this inform you about? What does this tell you about? And then draw everything together in a conclusion that relates to the questions and the hypotheses that you posed. So do your diagrams and calculations support your hypothesis? Do they prove it or disprove it? And then finally evaluate your work. Did you get the results that you expected? It doesn't matter if you didn't, but you can just say why you didn't and what you may do next time to improve the investigation that you do. Here are some possible data sources that you could use. Have a look at these websites to see if you can get the information that you need to complete your investigation. Fill in the worksheet that is posted on Google Classroom to go along with this. If you're doing diagrams by hand, you can just take pictures of those and attach those onto Google Classroom as well. Any questions you have, any queries, just contact your teacher and I'm sure they will quickly get back to you and help you. I hope you enjoyed this investigation and I look forward to seeing your findings.